This may sound very opinionated, so don't take offense to it. I'm not a wild, drunk, or doped up rant runner by saying this. This is real. Now I'm going to come out of my shell and say what I really think. There's this movie, Gran Torino, starring Clint Eastwood. And everybody was trying to get Clint Eastwood's Walt Kozlowski character to confess for his sins, quote unquote. In my mind, I thought, I was thinking, just wander on into a booth and say that you're really sorry about everything you did, and everything will all be resolved, just like that. How about that? Sarcasm, obviously, because I'm like, oh, sure, and then everything will go away. You'll never feel bad ever again about anything you did. I resist that stuff because, I don't know, a part of me doesn't really believe it. If you've done something wrong, that's bad. You shouldn't have done that, and it's your fault. And there's no way that anybody's you can't just go into a booth and expect that you're going to be forgiven. But why do I never come out and say that if that's honestly my honest opinion? Because I get too scared. Because you witness various celebrities on newscasts who got themselves into a big heated controversy over something they said, where their honest, true opinions shone through, but also caused them to get into trouble. Like, they might utter an anti-Semitic remark or something. I know I would not, because I would not utter an anti-Semitic remark because I'm half Jewish. Not very passionate about that, but about like getting offended. I don't easily get offended by anti-Semitism, but I'm not going to utter an anti-Semitic remark because it would be a taboo. I mean, I'm half Jewish, but it might be an anti-Semitic remark that a well-known famous celebrity might utter, or some hateful thing or something. And maybe at the time they didn't feel they were being hateful. Maybe the celebrity just blurted it out because if you really feel a certain way about something or something, the truth will eventually get out. And if you repress your true opinions long enough, sooner or later the truth will slip. And that's why I'm getting it out of my system right now, is that if I were a famous person, I could get into big trouble if I, said those taunting, the things that could be considered taunting or hostile differences. But I just don't believe, I really don't believe in the whole idea of the confessions box, because, how can it really, everything all be resolved? It's like, I confess I slitted half a dozen young men's throats, jugulars with my, bayonet on the end of, somebody could say, I slitted a ton of people's throats with this bayonet, and I blew all these people away, and I napalmed this village. But I really feel very sorry I did that. Okay, you're forgiven for everything you did. Oh, that's it. Okay, I feel so much better. Even though I might have killed half a dozen people, I still feel better. I don't think it's going to work that way. Another thing, manners, right? Oh, hi there, sir. You're one of the politest people I ever met. You just stood there. You didn't even argue one bit as I took your wife and raped her, and I took your wallet, and I took all your money, and you were just so polite the whole time. Oh, yeah. Now can you just stand there and let me reach in your pocket and take your wallet? Thank you. Oh, can you be so kind as to let me take your wife with me? Okay. Oh, that's nice of you. Now, can you go ahead, do me a favor, and take 10 paces in that direction, sir? That's right. Now, can you please be so kind as to walk off the cliff? You're doing a great job. Just take a step off that 1,000-foot cliff for me, please. He's the most polite person I ever dealt with. Right. So when does being well-mannered cause you to be a sucker for people's commands? That's a very fun and interesting analogy, but it's like, my way of thinking is that in the movie The Titanic, for instance, that came out when I was in high school, there was Jack Dawson's friends were, Leonardo DiCaprio's Jack Dawson character. His friends were all trapped below deck. And people were telling him, you need to be very polite and they were encouraging politeness and cooperativeness. Like, there's a good lad, blah, blah, blah. They wanted them to just cooperate and not have any protest. But then they were going to promise that they were eventually going to open up the doors. But then when the water started rising, they just got the hell out of there and left the third-class passengers trapped. Now, if it's life or death like that, do you still need to be polite and die with elegance and etiquette? Or do you probably need to try to bend the rules a little bit? People will forgive you. I mean, it's like, for instance, what about in that Lady Gaga music video, Telephone, or something? What if well, I shouldn't say that's a bad example, but you know all the cars sped away? Or what if there's a fire somewhere, like at the gas pump or something, and you need to drive your car out of there really quick, lickety-split, and the speed limit is 30. But you hightail it out of there at 65 miles an hour, and you shoot through a set of traffic lights even. You'd say even with nobody at the intersection, nobody's present there. You sped a great deal over the speed limit, but had you never sped over the speed limit, you would have gotten blown to bits because your car would have been within the radius of the explosion. That's an extreme example, but I mean, why didn't you go faster? You could have gotten out of there alive, the attendant asked at the pearly gates. Well, but the speed limit was 30, so I couldn't go over it. Yeah, but you could have lived if you did. So you got to break the rules sometimes. You can't always. Like, sometimes duty calls. You have to do what's necessary. So that's what I mean by when are manners more important than the overall safety and well-being of people that you know? Again, when is being well-mannered and etiquette more important than the safety and well-being of you and your loved ones? It's not necessarily perfect composure that's at the top of my to-do list, whereas it's more a matter of the bottom line, the essentials. So back to the whole fashion literacy thing. I never cared much about clothes. Clothes shopping to me is just another annoying occurrence because it requires money to do. If you could replace the wardrobe expenses with anything else you could be spending the money on, you would do it. Like I said, if given $600, I would not be spending it on clothes. I'd be spending it on things I like, my interests and hobbies, such as going up to New Hampshire to listen to radio stations, or motel costs and food expenses that all need to be poured into that trip. The same idea, whereas I don't care about I'm very brand blinded I don't care about what brand my shoes are, or about what brand my pants and shirts are. We usually wait for sales or clearances. That's another thing. Season, I don't care. All I see is clothes and a price tag. I see a price tag that I want to be reading of a value that's not going to break my wallet, basically. It's almost when I look at memory cards. My father and I purchased two 16 gig SanDisk Class 4 Ultra cards for $39.99 each, and that was a sale. They were $20 off, right? Now my father and I have always been seeing 8 gig memory cards with half the capacity each, that are going for more money than we spent per card that was twice the capacity. So for a 16 gigabyte card of the same make, my dad and I spent only $39.99 per card. Now, the 8 gigabyte cards, which is half of 16, are going for $42 each. So we got them on sale. We tend to wait for clearances or sales and purchase all our clothes from the middle income consumer expected brands and stuff. We don't really go for brands. We just see a store with a clearance sale, or I should say a retail. We just see a retail store that happens to have a clearance or a sale going on for their clothes, and we just see a lot of clothes that cost less, but that are a reasonable value to them, that will last a long time. And all we take note of, is the fact of how much money we can save. We don't care about if it's Levi's or what it is. We just see a sale. And honest to God, if you were to ask me what brand of shoes I'm wearing or what my pants are or whatnot, I'm not even going to be able to tell you what the brand or make is. Let alone the year. I don't care. So I guess that means, and plus I don't have that many outfits. I run out quick. We have to keep doing the laundry a lot. But because I would rather spend my money on motel visits and New Hampshire trips and stuff. But my mom likes shopping. It could be considered a homophobic assumption or generalization to make, to say that straight guys or heteros such as myself despise shopping for clothes and shoes. But that very stereotype or generalization does in fact apply to me, because that's what I'm like. How many pairs of shoes do I have? One. And they do the job, let me tell you. But I'm not being hateful against people who are opposed to this way of life. I'm just being very literal and fact-based. I'm just telling you the way I am, rather. But I think it's best for people to stick with what they're good at. Like you could have one friend who's great with computers, but who sucks at writing, and another person who's great with literature, but always could never know much about computers. So my thing I'm good at is radio, and everybody needs advertising. Radio is a good form of advertising, so that's what I do. I stick with what I know best. This memory card is holding quite a bit. I think my mom gets mad at me a lot because I tell these bad jokes, and I can't resist telling of bad jokes, but eventually it starts getting overbearing to people, and people mistake my refusal to cease telling the bad jokes for rudeness or inconsideracy. For, I think he's just doing that on purpose because he doesn't like his mother, so he's trying to annoy her. But when in fact, I find it funny, like mom might ask me, and mom might try to ask me, where's my purse? And I would tell her, it's where you left it. I'm laughing my ass off because I think that's funny, but my mom doesn't really. And I have to resist that urge or that temptation and crack those bad jokes with annoying, unhelpful answers and actually reach out to her and be more helpful of her. But the temptation to tell those bad jokes is too great and I just can't resist. And people might go, screw you, jerk. Right, because that's being inconsiderate, basically. And so that's what happens to me a lot. And if people had enough compassion, though, some people are more patient than others. My mother is one of the others classifications. It's not quite as patient. Plus, she always has to live with me. Like, any of even my most favorite, some of my most well-remembered people I knew in school might probably get fed up with having to live with me for a while because they might snap after a while. Even the most fun to hang around in my book might, go, Mark, it's getting old. Like, do you know how tall this table is? Yeah, it's as tall as its height. Oh, because a table's height is always how tall it is, and how tall a table is always equal to its height. Hey, do you know what the weather's going to be today? Yeah, it's going to be whatever the weather's going to be today. You know what time it is? Yeah, right now it's a certain time that it is. Mom, she gets tired of that really fast, so it sounds like I'm being like a 5 or 6 year old kid, or a toddler even, but those jokes are hilarious to me. My mother, however, on the other hand, does not share the same opinion. Or those jokes are hilarious to me. My mother, on the other hand, doesn't share that same opinion as I do about those things being funny. Hey, Mark, what are we going to have for supper? Food. No kidding, what kind? What food? Edible. Because food has, you would hope that a dinner would have the tendency to be on the edible side, wouldn't you? But those jokes are funny. I find them funny, but not a lot of people do. Or even Steve Urkel, right? So I once had a cousin who had boyfriend trouble when we were back in the 90s when we were both in high school. And I asked this cousin, or this boyfriend was said to have been very controlling and possessive. What would you do if you could have a boyfriend who was never mean to you or never tried to be bossing or manipulative or controlling of you, but the trade-off would have to be that boyfriend who was never mean to you and always nice to you had to be like Steve Urkel. Let's try not to imagine that. Right, because Steve Urkel, it's like if anyone who's known or ever seen Family Matters would recognize Steve Urkel could get irritating after a while because that Steve Urkel character has his very own classification of why a relationship would be, have its downfalls, I should say. Yeah, so that's how it is. So I asked this cousin, what if you could have a boyfriend that was never mean to you, but that was kind of like Steve Urkel? There's this scene, and it's sort of a funny scene from Family Matters, where this girl was breaking up, I believe Laura was her name, over the breakup of a boyfriend of hers. And Steve Urkel said, something to the effect of, on the bright side, you still got me. And she just started crying. So it's kind of like that. Like that scene in the original Back to the Future Part 1 where This Lorraine said, when I'm kissing, I don't know what it is, Marty, but when I'm kissing you, it's like I'm kissing my brother. Yeah, it's like that. That's what I mean. Almost like someone you know, but you just don't have that chemistry for, but that you care about and you're concerned about a lot. But you're just not feeling it on that vibe. That's what a lot of my favorite, well, girls I knew in school, that's how I was. I cared about them a lot, but I might have went to school with them for so many years that it's kind of like, I don't know, I always believe in dating people you don't know real well, that you might have met on a new job or something. Or you might have known them for a while, but, you know, it's not like, I say a job is different than going to school. When you go to school, you know, you grow up with one another. It's like that, but when you're at your job, you didn't grow up together. You know, you had your own childhoods and your own adolescence and stuff. That's kind of what I mean by, I don't mean that I believe in being fast. I mean I believe in dating people who you did not grow up together with. Although certain people would disagree. I'd have to say though that I think it would be weird to get married to someone that you went to school with for several years. Although people do marry how do I say, there are people out there who really will marry their high school sweethearts. You know, high school sweethearts will become their wives. That's not the case with me. And right now I'm just going to keep shooting this video until the battery power runs out. But I'm not so certain when that's going to happen. So I'm just going to keep on talking until it beeps at me. But yeah, there really are people out there whose high school sweethearts actually will become their wives. But that's not how I do it. I wish I got more involved in high school. I feel a little bit embarrassed or ashamed about how I never tried to take harder classes or get more involved. I didn't take enough risks. And so an element of that lack of incentive to take risks back when I was younger is sort of feeding into my motivation to try and go ahead and take more risks now. Maybe more opportunity laid out before me than I thought, but I hadn't been taking advantage of them, such as interning at local radio stations and whatnot and so forth. It's tough out there, you know. I could end up interning and then having people want to let me go because my